Okay, welcome to the New View. I'm a moderator today, Alana Hartsock. We have our team members, Elizabeth Gould, Marilyn Langlois, and Diane Perlman on today. And our special guest is Alice Slater. Welcome, Alice. And I'm going to
Thank you.
read her bio from the worldbeyondwar.org website. Alice Slater is a member of the board of directors of World Beyond War. She's based in New York City. She's the UN NGO representative of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. She's on the board of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space, the Global Council of Abolition 2000, and the Advisory Board of Nuclear Ban US, supporting the mission of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, which won the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize for its work in realizing the successful UN negotiations for a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. She began her long quest for peace on earth as a suburban housewife when she organized Eugene McCarthy's presidential challenge to Johnson's illegal war in Vietnam in her local community. As a member of the Lawyers Alliance for Nuclear Arms Control, she traveled to Russia and China on numerous delegations engaged in ending the arms race and banning the bomb. She's a member of the New York City Bar Association and serves on the Peoples Climate Committee-New York City, working for 100% green energy by 2030. Alice has written numerous articles and op-eds with frequent appearances on local and national media. So the ball is in your court, Alice, and thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you. And this is a very fraught time. We're hearing about a whole new explosion of nuclear weapons development, weapons, the space dome that Trump, and we're not paying attention to who the enemy supposedly is. We've been demonizing Russia and China and not really listening to what they have to say. And I had this experience in my childhood of growing up terrified of communists during the McCarthy era. I went to Queens College in 1953, and somebody gave me a pamphlet. We were having a discussion, and it said Communist Party of America, and my heart was pounding in terror. I put in my book bag. I go home in the Bronx and go up to the eighth floor, walk to the incinerator, throw it down the chute without even looking. It's how scared we were. And I remember when World War II ended, we were in a bungalow colony in Monticello, New York, the Catskill Mountains. People in New York would go away for the summer. We didn't have air conditioning. And the owners were Mr. and Mrs. Shribnik, who were Russian communist Jews. This was 1945. When the war ended, we were there that summer, and we marched into town with pots and pans banging and, celebrating with the Shribnik. And Mr. and Mrs. Shribnik, they had a casino. We called it a casino. It was like a rec room with a piano. And my father, who could play any instrument by ear, Mr. Shribnik taught him all these Russian folk songs, and he was playing them on the piano. When we get back in 1946, my mother and father go to a meeting of the American Jewish Committee, and they were very, my grandparents came from Hungary and Poland. We had people that died in the Holocaust. We were very affected by all of this. And they're at the meeting of the American Jewish Committee, and they're playing Mr. Shribnik's songs. And my mother says to my father, Saul, these people are communists. We got to get out of here. And they leave the meeting. I mean, this was the mentality of how we felt about Russia and communism. We were totally brainwashed. And then I went to the Soviet Union. After my kids were grown, I went to law school, so I shouldn't have empty nest syndrome. And I was doing regular litigation, and I see in the law journal there's a meeting for the Lawyers Alliance for Nuclear Arms Control, the luncheon. And that's interesting. So I go and I wind up on the board and with McNamara and Colby. Gorbachev comes in, stops nuclear testing. And our lawyers go to Congress and say, Russia, stop. We should stop. Oh, you can't trust the Russians. So the head of our bar association in New York, Adrian Bill de Wind, who was from the Dutch de Winds that lived up the Hudson with the Roosevelts and the Vanderbilts, the original settlers, raised $3 million from his wealthy friends, hired a team of seismologists, and we go over to the Soviet Union with Gorbachev, with Perestroika and Glasnost, and we ask them if they will let us put our seismologists around the Soviet test site. Because Russia, now when Gorbachev came in, he said, we're going to stop testing. And our country said, you can't trust them. We're not going to stop. And they said, yes, you can. And we put our seismologists at the Soviet test site in Kazakhstan and went back to Congress and said, you don't have to trust the Russians. We have seismology. If they test, we'll know that they're cheating. And we were able to stop nuclear testing. So it was like a miracle. And when I got there, I saw every guy over 60 walking around with his World War II medals. And I found out that Russia lost 27 million people to the Nazi onslaught. Who ever heard of that?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm Jewish. We talk about the 6 million Jews, so it's coming out of your ears, but I never heard 27 million. And by the way, I just heard a new number. I'm 87 years old that I didn't know. China lost 33 million people to the Japanese. We are totally insensitive to what those countries have suffered. And in the Soviet Union, when I was there, every street corner had a monument to the dead. You go to the Leningrad Cemetery now, St. Petersburg, 800,000 mass graves from the Nazi siege of Leningrad. And we had a guide. He said to me, why don't you Americans trust us? And I said, why don't we trust you? Arrogance. I said, what about Hungary? What about Czechoslovakia? Why should we trust you? And he looks at me with tears in his eyes. He says, we had to protect our border from Germany. And I looked at him, and that was their truth. They were never coming after us. That was just an excuse to keep what my friend Ray McGovern calls the Mickey Mat going. Eisenhower warned in his farewell address about the military-industrial complex, that it has too much influence. Well, Ray McGovern, who was a former CIA agent and used to do the morning briefings for Clinton and Bush, and he's now in the peace movement, he says to me, Alice, it's not the military-industrial complex. It's the Mickey Mat. I said, Ray, what's the Mickey Mat? The military-industrial, congressional, academic, media, think tank, intelligence think tank complex. They're all in bed. They're all crafting a message, and we're not getting the true story. And that's why I think it's very important that we watch what Russia and China are saying and promote it. That was this article I just got published, a serious proposal. Russia and China call for global strategic stability. They did a joint statement at the UN on the 80th anniversary of World War II, and they noted the serious challenges facing the international community and laid out a lot of recommendations to strengthen global strategic security. And they went on to explain a whole series of provocative actions that threaten the peace, including states deploying nuclear weapons and missiles outside their territory. We keep U.S. nuclear weapons at 5 NATO countries. U.S. nuclear weapons are in Belgium, Germany, Italy, Turkey, and the Netherlands. And Gorbachev, when he let the war go without a shot, he dissolved the Warsaw Pact. He was very nervous about a united Germany going into NATO because they lost 27 million people. And we said to him, don't worry, let Germany come in and be united, and we give you our word. We will not expand NATO 1 inch to the east. And it was Clinton that came in and started taking all those countries in. And it was Putin's red line. He said it over and over again. Don't let Ukraine go into NATO because they have like a 600-mile border with NATO. I mean, if they put missiles and war games in Canada or Mexico, we'd go bananas. We did during Cuba. And by the way, the Cuban Missile Crisis, this is very interesting because none of us read about this. Kennedy was being advised to bomb the crap out of Cuba and get the Russian missiles out of Cuba. And he sent secret delegations to talk to Khrushchev, Bobby Kennedy, and other, I forgot there was another guy. But anyway, they spoke to Khrushchev, and Khrushchev said they put their missiles in Turkey because we had just put missiles in Cuba because we had just put missiles in Turkey on their border. And Khrushchev told them, Khrushchev and Kennedy were secretly talking. And Khrushchev said to Kennedy, if you take your missiles out of Cuba, we'll take us out of Russia. And Kennedy says, okay, it's a deal. You take them out and then I'll take them out, but you can't tell anybody. They'll never let me do it. And we never read about this. I just found out about this maybe 5, 10 years ago, not then. And Khrushchev pulled them out and they made a big deal how we really scared them and got them out of there. And then Kennedy quietly took them out of Turkey 6 months later. And they're back. They're in Turkey, they're in Italy, they're in Germany, they're in Holland and the Netherlands. I mean, this is what we're doing. And Putin at one point actually asked if Russia could join NATO. And we said no. In other words, we just need this enemy because they're making a killing on killing, and you're not getting the news and you're not getting the story. And that's why I'm so glad that this paper got picked up, because nobody is saying one of the things they said. They talked all the goals of the provocative actions that threaten the peace, including states deploying nuclear weapons and missiles outside their territories. Bush walked out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty we had in 1972 with Russia that we would only have one missile base each. And we had one in North Dakota and they had one in Moscow. And then Bush walked out of it and Obama put one in Romania and then Trump put one in Poland. This is happening now in our times. And they say that they're particularly critical of the U.S. Golden Dome program. You know about this, that we're going to dominate the heavens and, World Beyond War on our website, they did a cartoon of the Golden Dome with Trump sitting at his desk with a big golden dome on his head. Anyway, this is what I'm going to quote. The two sides oppose the attempts of individual countries to use outer space for armed confrontation. Confirm the need to start negotiations on a legally binding instrument based on the Russian-Chinese draft of the Treaty on the Prevention of Weapons in Outer Space and the Threat or Use of Force Against Outer Space Objects. And they put a draft treaty in 2018 and 2014 into the Commission on Disarmament in Geneva, where you need consensus to discuss it. A draft treaty, Russia and China, to keep weapons out of space. And we vetoed it. We wouldn't let them even talk about it. And that's what they're asking us now. So we have to, and they gave a pledge. They agreed to promote on a global scale the international leadership of political commitment not to be the first to deploy weapons in outer space. Russia and China made this pledge. Don't you think this should be on the front page of the New York Times?
Yeah.
Shouldn't this be Rachel Maddow talking about it? Or, I mean, there's no press on our side. There is no peace press. They're all part of the Mickey Mouse. The military intelligence, congressional, academic, media think tank. And, we can't, our Mother Earth is suffering. I mean, if we don't make a deal, it's all over. And they want to. As a matter of fact, China is moving ahead so quickly on sustainable energy, and electrical vehicles, hydrogen fuel cells. Hydrogen's like the miracle gas. If you hydrogen and oxygen, when you burn hydrogen, it combines with oxygen and goes back to becoming H2O, water. So you got water coming out of your tailpipe. And why are we still doing coal and gas? Because it's greed. It's corporate corruption. And our whole Congress is corrupt. It's not just Republicans. I mean, they're terrible, but the Democrats, they're on the take. Biden was on the take. Obama made a little deal with Medvedev where they negotiated to cut about 1,500 nuclear weapons each. And he promised $1 trillion over the next 20 years for 2 new bomb factories, missiles, rockets, planes, weapons. Obama, the great liberal. I was so thrilled when he got elected, black, Harvard graduate, lawyer. 3 weeks after he got elected, he went in the back room and made a deal with the insurance companies for abominable care. I mean, he campaigned on Medicare for all. It was all bullshit. And then, I certainly didn't vote for him the next. Anyway, any questions? I think,
Oh
did I
my,
say
that was
enough?
a powerful opening opening
It was the opening
statement.
and the closing.
Yeah. And that is it. You're an octogenarian, and the rest of us are nearly there. We'll catch up soon. And you've been a peace activist and a lawyer and involved in international law and these things for decades. Your life has been devoted to this. Really, at this point in time, I mean, your feelings come through your talk of exasperation. And can you just say a little bit what it feels like to be Alice Slater right now at this point in time?
Well, I have long COVID. This is something interesting. I mean, I had all the vaccines, and then after 2.5 years in the house, we all got out, we went out, and I was totally vaccinated, and I got it. And I got better. So I got on a plane and I flew to LA to see my daughter, and I went to the UN to ban the bomb. And I got it again and again and again. And I
Oh,
had one condition after another. And now I got a walker and a cane. And I'm like, I
oh,
turned
oh,
into an old lady in 1 year.
oh.
So, but at least my brain is still,
Clearly, your brain is there.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm 87. So my mother lived to 96. So I feel,
You got a lot more trouble to make in another
I
decade.
don't want to, I can't know how I'm going to make it in this condition, but whatever. They don't know what that is either, the COVID stuff.
If you can
Because it
wave a,
wasn't, the
yeah.
vaccine was not a dead virus. It was a whole new technology where it attacked genetic material. And if you had the wrong genes, you got attacked. I mean, Bobby Kennedy, as nuts as he is, I mean, he's onto something there a little bit. So,
Well, the team here has really been following the problems of the COVID vaccine. And so we're sorry. I'm sorry that you took all those vaccinations. We know there's been many, many injuries from them. And we will send you all that we found out, that there are ways that some of the alternative doctors are saying to deal and cope with.
oh,
And
I'd love to know that. I switched to NYU. They had a long COVID clinic, and the
okay.
pulmonologist there, who was the head of the clinic, who was treating me because one of the issues was lungs. I said, "So what are you finding out?" She said, "We don't have enough money for the research."
Oh my, well, she,
And Bernie was trying to get $1 billion through the Congress to study COVID, and they didn't let him. So,
okay.
well,
It, let's I'm going to ask her one more question, and then the other three of you, please raise your hand or just start speaking, because there's so much we'd like to converse with Alice. I know. Alice, if you could wave a magic wand, what would happen right now?
we would elect Mamdani because there were like 30,000 kids going door to door making 20 million phone calls for him. And he's a Muslim, and he's a democratic socialist. He wants to freeze the rent and have, I mean, he's like sharing some of the wealth again, like FDR did. That's what stopped the country from going communist in the 30s, but the Democrats got nuts, you know. So if I could wave a wand, he's the mayor and New York leads the way, and we tell Trump to go stop it.
Okay. All right. Diane.
Right.
All right. Yeah. So, anyway, I just want to say, Alice, I remember when I met you. First of all, I got involved in the nuclear issue in 1981 through Helen Caldicott and Physicians for Social Responsibility. And I went to a symposium on medical consequences of nuclear war that totally changed my life and blew my mind. But I kept hearing about this Alice Slater person, actually from Jonathan Granoff, probably mostly. And I went to the Hague Appeal for Peace in 1999, and that's where I first met you. And we crossed paths many times at the UN and on the Global Council of Abolition 2000. So anyway, I started as a speaker for Physicians for Social Responsibility in 1983. And I used to do slideshows on, and I'm a psychologist, not a MD, but I did things on the image of the enemy and the psychology of the arms race. And there's a quote, to lose a friend is a tragedy, but to lose an enemy is a catastrophe. And and the slideshows I did then with political cartoons of the evil empire, I could do the same exact slideshow today. And
So
Russophobia.
what good is it? What good did we do?
So, and the other thing, when you were saying that on every corner they had like monuments and everything, one thing I remember in the psychology is that in our like fairy tales, like the heroes are always like Superman who are defying everything, and in the Russian, their fairy tales are like men and women who died defending their village. So they have much more sense of
Well, they
vulnerability.
have heart. They have heart.
So I just wanted to say that. So it's great to see you, and thanks for all your contributions. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, they have Tchaikovsky and Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. I mean, you've never seen Swan Lake until you see it in St. Petersburg. It's over the top, like so lush and Russian. I can't, you know, there's a lot of heart there, a lot of heart. Great. I remember Diane meeting with you, and Helen and I are friends. We're the same age. We became friends. Like
Yeah,
I
I'm in
visited
contact
her in
with,
Australia. She visited me. She was great.
yeah, I did a tribute for Dan Ellsberg at the Whistleblower Summit, and she contributed. She said some wonderful comments about him.
And
So I'm
I always asked Helen because I was in law school during the freeze when they had the million people in
yeah, I
Central
was
Park.
yeah.
And then they went home and we still had nuclear forever, right? And I said, why did they call it freeze? Why didn't they say abolition? Why did they ask for free? And it's been co-opted. The message, it's getting co-opted now. We got the global uh, campaign to ban the bomb, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. We got the Nobel Peace Prize right after that. They launched this huge, well-funded campaign back from the brink. No first use. What kind of bullshit is that? I mean, why aren't you calling for abolition? And I just read that there's a new scholarly term called antipreneurism, you know, instead of entrepreneurism,
Huh.
antipreneurism. And it means that you're always going for steps on arms control and never calling for elimination and abolition. And that's what we're getting now. We're getting everything, all the big money is going to that message. No first use, no single person's hand on the button. They're going to make a big deal like we should have two people's hands on the button.
It's an arms control, right?
Yeah, arms control
Oh, control.
forever.
And also dealing with the symptom and not the cause. And even abolition. Um, Years ago, I met a man named Wendell Fogg and Richard Wendell Fogg, and he had a study for Center for Study of Conflict. And he said, we shouldn't talk about abolishing war, we should talk about replacing war. And one of the things in the field, one thing I'm trying to do in abolition, like a working group, and also with Transcend. Are you familiar with Johann Galtung and
Yeah.
Father? Yeah, so Marilyn and I are in Transcend, and I'm about to start one. Is like dealing with analyzing what's the underlying conflict about, and what are the legitimate goals that the parties have, and how you can meet basic human needs and legitimate goals. So it's you deal with the underlying relationships and you create a new reality but then the problem now is that the goals are illegitimate, like world domination. So that's, Marilyn can maybe say
Yeah.
something.
Okay, thank you so much, Alice. I'm so honored to meet you on this call. I've heard so much about you. Really appreciate your being here. I must say, I'm fortunate enough, I saw Swan Lake performed in St. Petersburg in 20.
Like me.
My
I
sister
saw you nodding, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like over the top. Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, my sister and I were in Finland, in Helsinki. We took the train. We arrived in Leningrad. We arrived in St. Petersburg at the Finland station and stayed for a few days and had a really wonderful experience there. But also, I want to point out that, the US it's so insidious the way propaganda is used, because during the war, as late as 1944, Hollywood movies were being made showing the Russians as our great friends and allies. In fact, my son-in-law, who's a film studies scholar, brought to my attention a film from 1944. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it portrays the Germans as the evil Nazis, of course, and the brave villagers in Russia. And to show you that the Russians are the good guys, the hero of the village is portrayed by none other than Gregory Peck, the hero Vladimir.
The Russian.
Yeah, but
It was.
within a year, the script flipped, because underneath it all, the U.S. powers of the be were always virulently anti-communist. And I sense that they really used the Soviet Union, or they used the World War II. Really, they wanted to weaken the Soviet Union. And they did weaken it, but they didn't destroy it. And then suddenly, Russia goes from being our ally to our worst enemy. And we saw what happened in Hiroshima. The first atom bomb was dropped for no military reason whatsoever. The main purpose was to threaten the Soviet Union and show them what we've got. So that's all very disturbing to see how that's all mixed up. But I'm going to stop there because I have to step out for a minute, but I just want to thank you so much for all you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. I read in my friend Blanche Wiesen Cook, who wrote a three-volume series of Eleanor Roosevelt's biography, says that Churchill was telling Roosevelt wanted to get into the war to help Russia fight the Nazis. And Churchill was saying, no, let the Germans kill the Russians, come up through Italy. I mean, we didn't get into Europe until D-Day was 1944. The war was going on, and we first went up through Italy to take care of Mussolini. That was what Churchill was telling FDR, let the Germans kill the Russians. I mean, they were ready to make the Russians our enemy as soon as the war was over. They did that.
I think that FDR did have a lot to do with that, and of course he ended up mysteriously dying at the right moment. And we know that Truman, was very prepared to move in this new direction, directed by Churchill. Okay,
right.
The famous Iron Curtain speech established firmly. And
right.
A lot of other things were happening back then. And I did want to just mention it because when you bring up your revelation about realizing that the narrative that you've been told about certain things is not true, I think that that has to do with almost every single military adventure the U.S. has been engaged in.
Right.
It doesn't, it's not limited at all. My husband and I got involved with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 as journalists. And I can tell you that unless you made a special effort to go beyond Charlie Wilson's war in your understanding of it, just like you learned about, in your experience about Russia back in the Soviet days with your experience, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was actually completely orchestrated by Zbigniew Brzezinski in the Carter administration. And it is still a story that the average American has no idea about. And that's
I don't know that.
Exactly. I knew, how could you? That's the point. So I think we have to deal with a reality that's not easy, that the entire educational system is in on this, okay? And it goes back to the Cultural Cold War that was activated by the CIA in 1953. It was all part of setting up the educational system itself to make sure that, and specifically that Europe never went communist. That was the biggest concern. Also, of course, in the United States too. And so when people focus today on what's going on with the issue of Israel and what is allowed and not allowed and focus on that, it misses the origin process of completely managing what was acceptable dialogue coming out of the academic world. So, and it was never real. I think the impression was given that there was enough latitude, but you really have to look at which researchers were getting funding for which kind of research, who was writing the books that were being read by the various people who were doing the journalism at CBS and ABC and NBC.
Yeah.
And that's who we dealt with the true story about the.
Where were you doing journalism?
Well, what happened was when the Soviets invaded in 1979, about a month later, the Western media was completely shut down. They had no access to cable. And we were
No, but who were you working for?
I was working with my husband, Paul Fitzgerald. We were independent journalists doing documentary work, and we decided to get the first visa. We tried to get the first, and we did. We got the first visa to get in, and we went to CBS News, who wanted to have the first look through us. So we were independent, but we were working with the networks. That's how we were able to do it. And of course, what we discovered was the actual story that we brought back was not the story that CBS wanted. And we ended up doing another story for ABC News.
I have a great CBS story. My ex-husband, I married my husband when I was 19, and he was an usher at CBS, and he wound up general manager of PBS.
Yeah.
And on the way up, he was going up through the news department in operations. He wasn't a newsman, but operations. And Fred Friendly was president of CBS News and quit because they wouldn't carry the Vietnam hearings with McNamara and Rusk during the day and preempt the I Love Lucy reruns. And he went to the Ford Foundation and got money and set up CPB and PBS. Like that was, he was, and when he died, this is really something. He died about 5 years ago, Friendly, who then became dean of Columbia University Journalism School of Journalism. In his obituary, they said not that they didn't want to lose the I Love Lucy commercials, but that Stanton, the president of CBS, told Friendly that Lyndon Johnson had called him and said, I don't want you covering McNamara and Rusk testifying to Congress on Vietnam. And we never heard that story.
Yeah.
That came in.
Yeah, we were dealing with the same problem because we didn't know at the time when we first brought the story back that this operation had actually started when Brzezinski came in as National Security Advisor under Carter in January of 1977. The Soviet invasion was December of 1979. He activated his plan to draw the Soviets into Afghanistan starting in January of 1977. Okay. And if you're interested, I'd be happy to send you a research paper we did on
I'd love
the Carter administration's role in all of this. It's quite shocking for a lot of people because many people still believe that Carter was really a peace guy and he really wanted peace. That may be true, and he may have done certain things along that line, but he also assisted in the entire creation of the extremist Muslim problem that resulted in 9/11 was directly connected to what Brzezinski activated in 1977.
You know what group I'm with? Code Pink. They're wonderful. They formed when the World Trade Center was attacked, and Bush was saying code red for danger, code orange for alert, code yellow.
Right.
And they said, we're code pink for peace. And
right.
what the hell are you bombing Afghanistan? What did they ever do to the World Trade Center? I mean, the whole thing is so crazy. And Trump, the broken clock that's right twice a day, wanted to declassify the Kennedy, the Warren Commission report, which is total bullshit. You know, it's secret still, 50 years later. And the last chapter of the 911 report that has everything in there about Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan never had anything to do with it. I mean, it was
Nothing.
it
Right.
was it was crazy. They got us into this whole battle, you know.
Right. Well, in truth, it was all orchestrated out of the Carter White House, and it had little to do with the Soviet Union directly and less to do with Afghanistan at all. So I think that is, that is the part of the crisis that when you talk about how things are happening today that don't seem to make sense, what you said about the obvious desire that other partners want to move towards a peaceful solution. That was the whole point in 1976. Carter actually got elected on a
Do
detente
that.
platform, that the whole point was the Vietnam War had totally devastated the economy. Okay, and this was part of the problem. They needed reinvestment in the civilian economy. And that was part of the appeal of Carter. He was going to push for detente and less defense spending. But while that was going on, Brzezinski was activating his secret
Yeah.
plan that even the Directorate of Operations from 1979 to 84, Chuck Hogan, was unaware of what Brzezinski was doing, because he was able to co-opt the covert operations from the CIA, so he got to do it all in secret. So,
Well,
and
you
that
should
was under Carter.
write a baby talk fact sheet, not more than 2 pages about
I
this, and let's get it
I
out
know.
all
Well,
over. I mean, we have to start getting Americans to know that Russia is not the enemy.
Right.
You
right.
know,
Well,
it's
this
like
is
what
yeah,
Pogo said, we met the enemy and he is us, right? In the
Right.
right.
1950s. That was during the Red Scare, the first Red Scare, you know, and we've
Well,
never stopped, you know.
yes.
I met the enemy in 1968. I was a student in Vienna, and a group of us rented a van, and we went into Prague 5 weeks after the bad Russian Soviets had invaded, because Dubček wanted Czechoslovakia to be more autonomous. And after touring around with some of the rebel buildings and bomb buildings in the middle of town, middle of Prague, we had the idea to go out to the barracks where the Russian soldiers were staying. Okay, so here we are, about 10 Americans. We go out to the barracks, and out come about 10 or 12 Russian enemy soldiers. Within 5 minutes, we were trading things back and forth. We were taking pictures of each other. We had arms wrapped around in a line, taking pictures, trading those little Soviet pins for cigarettes and various kinds of things. And they were 18 and 19-year-old people just like us, uh, missing their girlfriends, wanting to go back to their cities and be back home. And the whole idea of these are the enemy completely dissolved. And then I spent quite a few years trying to understand what is creating the enemy. And I think that's a big question. Those of us who see there are no enemies, we are all human beings. And we need to absolutely respect life, and that thou shalt not kill each other anymore. So, Alice is someone who has a very deep, long, and vast overview of the peace movement. Where do you see its leading edge? Where do you see, if you do, a most promising or hopeful way forward?
We're all beyond war. David Swanson is the executive director. He was Dennis Kucinich's speechwriter, which was the only decent person we ever had in Congress if you wanted a bill to stop a war or say,
Yes.
and Code Pink. There are people doing good work, and we just have to keep on keeping on. But I'm very excited about New York City. I think New York's going to make a big splash with Mamdani. It's changing everything. It's getting Because what we're doing right now, we're refighting the Civil War. They're putting up Confederate general statues. I mean, it's like we never ended the Civil
Well,
War in
it,
America. It's like we didn't know about it growing up. We were in the promised land, I mean, our generation. But now we can see what's going on. It's
it,
totally
it seems like since our U.S. foreign policy is and has been based on full spectrum dominance for quite a while, it's an imperialist agenda,
forever.
and we the people have never been asked for any serious input into foreign policy. It's not considered the
Right.
people's domain to make such decisions. So, uh, how do we move into uh, the ability of the good-hearted people to see that they're paying for war and slaughter through their tax dollars? So I want you to think about that. But Marilyn has had her hand up for a bit, and she's able to rejoin us. So I want to have Marilyn's input at this point to you too, Alice.
Oh, thank you, Alana. Yeah, sorry I had to step away for a minute, but yeah, I think this is super important. I think one of the things that is very necessary to do is to resist their efforts to divide us and conquer us. Sowing division right and left. When I leave here, I'm going to fly to Portland, Oregon to visit my daughter. I say,
Where is here? Where
I,
is here? Where are you?
I'm in Richmond, California. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. But my daughter is in, quote, the war zone, which is ridiculous. I mean, Portland,
Insane.
Oregon is one of the most chill cities. Yeah, they have demonstrations every now and then. They have protests, but so what, So anyway, but we have to resist the effort to get riled up against other people who are our brothers and sisters and recognize what the real adversary is. And to me, the real adversary is in that structure you mentioned earlier, Alice, the Mickey Mac. To Mickey Mac, I would add a few more initials, like, for example, PTB, P being big pharma. I'm really sorry that you've got these health challenges, Alice, but I can sense you have such a strong personality and a brilliant mind and such resilience. I think you're going to do fine, and I'm confident you make it to at least 96. So more power to you. But we know, and we on the New View have critiqued the very deleterious effects of big pharma and its rampant greed on our health and our well-being. There, and then the T is for big tech. We know that tech is about to try to control us through massive surveillance and all of that sort of thing. And then the really big one that people in this group are more expert on than I am, the big B, the big banks, the financial interests, the severe concentration of wealth, the Wall Street, City of London, big finance and banking consortiums that control the money, because they use that money to perpetuate this very, very evil and sinister agenda and keep us all distracted and fighting with each other and fighting all these other little ancillary peripheral causes. So I think we have to remind, not in terms of individual people, but in terms of structures, and we have to dismantle those structures.
It's the corporate patriarchy, and it's going. It's going. It's in its last gasps. There's a whole new thing coming together, a more cooperative. But when somebody's going, they can get very violent. I mean, we have to have a soft landing, is what. Or they'll bring the whole house down, like the Samson option. That's why I'm so worried. I mean, about Israel's nuclear weapons. They're crazy enough, like the Samson of it, that they can't lose.
They're not going down gently. Yeah.
Right. I mean, this that they made a settlement. I don't believe a word of what I'm reading. I mean, that's bullshit. They're not going to give up the hostages until they know there's no war, and there's no guarantee of that. Anyway, as a Jewish person, it makes me feel very bad.
Yes, I feel I have a very specific responsibility as a Jew to deal with this. But we haven't talked specifically about propaganda. And in terms of like the deep state and what's going on also in Gaza and also with COVID. I mean, the propaganda was brilliant. It was pervasive. And the intimidation and the censorship was very extreme. And I think for that, to deal with that, we need to teach people how to know when they're being lied to, and you have to give people skills of like demystification and how do you know who to believe and how do you know how to think. So that's one defense against the propaganda.
Well, but how do you
make,
set that up? How do you set that up?
well, I would make one point that I think I have certainly come to believe, going back to our original revelation about how the networks framed the narrative, in 1981, that we witnessed for the entire decade and took us on a journey because we could not believe every network was involved, every official in Washington was involved, and there was nobody who thought that the free press of the United States wasn't the best press in the world. So when you're dealing where you're recognizing the manipulation, look, let's go back 1,000 years. How can you be sure what you have been told about the history we came from isn't as corrupted as what's going on today? So this is a very, long process that we've got to come to some new way of engaging it. Okay.
And communicating, not communicating with each other on a more honest basis, that because what we're getting from the mainstream media, I mean, it's breaking up now, it's going into these podcasts, but now, everybody's getting a different story, we're in a time of breakup and reorganizing. It's good to think about how do we organize.
Well, it is. When the Soviet Union fell apart, those first years, as you recall, I mean, the intellectuals said yes to the Soviet Union. They say, no, we don't want this anymore. And it broke apart as it did. And then the people went through quite a long period of suffering, like several years. There was hunger, there was prostitution, there was a lot of devastation.
Their life expectancy fell to 56 from 78 or something.
Oh, rapid decline. So that's because, in my view, the intellectuals did not have a clear way forward. They knew their no, but they didn't know their yes. And I believe this is the point we're at now. If we're to avoid a collapse that's violent, we need to be able to collapse into something better. And I really think the intellectuals, we need to get our values really clear. We need to get out of old right and old left. We need to find a way to have an economy that's both fair and free, that addresses the gross wealth inequality and power inequality, but without centralized governance or command control of the communist system. So to me, that means decentralism. How do we really make the local economy strong and powerful? Basic needs are food, shelter, clean water, education, healthcare. All these basic needs of humans can be solved on a very local level and on a regional level. So I think that the minimal amount of governance needed on the national level, we need to clarify, and also globally. I mean, there are people that are just so anti-United Nations, but they don't understand the dynamic of how the big money is playing into the problems of the UN, and it was never meant to be a world government. So the need for a proper kind of United Nations reform, but we need some minimal global governance. We just can't have no governance. So the understanding of the economic and politics from the decentralized level, then regional up through global, I think we need to clarify, and we need to clarify the money problem and the land problem and the taxation issues that is an interface between the people and the government.
I think we never really had communism. We had a corruption, but what we need is communalism.
Yeah.
We need community, and we need to be able to, work at the local level, the state level, the national level, the international level, communally, where there's one man, one vote, where we don't have a veto in the Security Council. I mean, you can see what the ideal is, how to get there, I hope New York can start it somehow with
Well,
our new mayor. We'll see what happens.
I think that the Iron Mountain story, I think, is a good place to start historically for that discussion. It's
What is that?
the Iron Mountain document was produced. It began out of the Kennedy administration, and I'm sure you know that Jack Kennedy was actually an incredible promoter of a peaceful world, and he left an unbelievable evidence of his attempts at bringing ideas to people, culminating with an amazing presentation in June 10th, 1963 at American University.
Yeah.
And it was his peace speech that still to this day, I'm sure you're well aware, is studied. Well, in the 1960s, during his administration, there were a number of people who began to think about what would the world be like, what would be like without war. Okay, and they began to make a study of it, and it involved people like Dean Rusk and McNamara. So a lot of the people who were very well known, obviously pretty well known hawks, were all involved in this, and many people in the administration. It ultimately wasn't finished, I think, until the early 70s. But what it revealed was that people in that time period looking at a future without war didn't know how to actually even think about it. They couldn't imagine a world without the economic engine of war had already infected everybody's thinking. So we have to actually think about how do we uninfect the thinking of people who have become completely, I'd say at this point, infected. It's a good word to use by this weaponization process. And apparently the easy money that comes with going in that direction has clearly worked. I think we've all acknowledged that. I think Alice, your points about all the efforts that kept getting dead-ended was because the interests that benefited, and it isn't just people who are going for money. You do also have powerful ideologues like Zbigniew Brzezinski, who were hell-bent on winning the Cold War, and he was willing to destroy Afghanistan, which it did, okay, to win the Cold War, all right, which, obviously was a proud moment for him in 1998 when he boasted publicly about, luring the Soviets into their own Vietnam, while he was in the Carter administration. So I think that's part of what we have to deal with, that inside of us, we have a dialectic that's at war with ourselves. And part of what can be pulled out of us without us even knowing how is our salute. When we're told the war is on under certain conditions, you sign on, and that's it, because that's part of the preconditioning that already exists in all of us in some way. And so I think it's those of us who have recognized some level of it where we're separating from it and we're not as easily brought back into it. But we learn, though, there is such a constant flow now. It's very hard for people to get a grounding, okay, a better grounding to
I
move
think
outside of it.
I think it's easier now. I think people are looking and seeing how bad it got,
Yeah, I agree.
that we were unconscious. I
Yes.
mean, I became an activist. I was watching television in 1968. I was a housewife in Massapequa with two babies, and they had like CBS reports, or must have been Edward R. Murrow, or some Cronkite when they did real news, and they were showing old news film of Ho Chi Minh going to Woodrow Wilson in 1919 after World War I, begging us to help him get the French out of Vietnam. He even modeled his constitution on ours. This was on CBS News. First of all, just to even tell you this. And I was shocked. We turned him down because France was our ally.
Yeah.
And the same night on television, the kids at Columbia were rioting. They were breaking down doors and windows. They didn't want to be drafted in Vietnam. And my husband came home. I was terrified. I said, what is the matter with these kids? Don't they know this was America? Why are they doing this? I better do something. And I go down to the Massapequa Democratic Club, and they're having a debate between the hawks and the doves, and I joined the doves, and I never stopped. McCarthy lost them. We took over the whole Democratic Party. This was the greatest achievement. I did it on Long Island for 2 years. My husband moved to Washington. I did it in Maryland. We nominate George McGovern is going to end the war in Vietnam. The media never wrote an honest word about McGovern. The New York Times, the front page was Eagleton's nervous breakdown from 30 years or his vice president. And when Bernie got all those votes and all that money and Hillary got the nomination, it's because of the superdelegates. The superdelegates, they put them in because of us. They were never going to let that happen again. We're grassroots, door to door, one a peace candidate. They have now every state party has weighted, so they put their thumb on the scale and pick whoever they want. It doesn't matter who people voted for in the primary.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Thank you, Alice, for reminding us about the power of those grassroots, efforts.
Oh,
I'm fascinated by your story of 1968. I was in college then. I just started college, and I was going to weekly peace vigils on my campus against the war in Vietnam. But the fact that CBS actually had a program about Woodrow Wilson and Ho Chi Minh back at the Treaty of Versailles, I never knew about that. It wasn't until I got to know Johann Galtung, 23 years ago. And in one of his talks, he educated me. He talks about how, Ho Chi Minh was at the Treaty of Versailles, and he listened to Woodrow Wilson talk about how the importance of ending colonialism and sovereignty for all nations. And Ho Chi Minh said, oh, well, okay, I guess we'll take some of that, not realizing Wilson was only referring to the European nations,
not white people.
So yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And this is the sort of stuff people need to have in their consciousness, I think. So thank you for mentioning that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what got me going.
Yeah. Well, wonderful women. We've connected a lot of dots and we've explored wide and deep. And I would love to talk with Alice some more.
I want to talk with all of you. You're all fabulous. I'm so glad to meet you all. I'll be part of the group.
Wow.
That would be great.
No, when you meet and talk, right?
Yeah,
I have nothing to do except stay at home and be on Zoom and talk because I have long COVID. The only thing that's working is my brain. So this gives me like a whole lift today.
Oh, great. Well, we did have Ellen Brown on our team, and then Ellen had to or chose to drop out. So we sort of have a vacancy from
well, I think it would be great to talk with you guys. What do you do, once a month or something like that?
Oh, every week.
Oh, every week?
But right now it's Monday at 1. Well, let's talk about that, see how we work in terms of our schedules and everything. But I
can't do Monday. I can't do
Monday.
That's the only thing I have now is like a reading group.
Okay.
What are you reading? What are you reading, Alice?
We read short stories.
Oh, good. Well, let's close the recording for now. And we can still talk informally after I stop the recording. But thank you so much for being with us today, Alice. Really appreciate your vision, your expertise, your experience, and your life.
Thank you. I appreciate you all. Wonderful.